The first story starts when I was 2. I don't remember it much, but my parents have told me this multiple times. We lived in this little white house. It was very old. My parents used to always hear me laughing and playing in my room with someone, but there was no one in my room. When they asked who I was talking to, I told them it was a little boy named Omar. They thought it was just an imaginary friend, but now that I think back on it, when I was 3 and 4, I did see someone. He was always very kind to me. I would play Barbies and he would play with me. He would draw me pictures. I would leave my books out for him so he could read while I was at preschool. I would tell him about my days and he would tell me about his. But things started to get really weird once my brother was born, and that is when my parents started to see him too. They believe that this is because he wanted to be the only little boy in the house. Stay tuned for part 2. Here is part 2 of the series of the little boy. When my brother was born, my parents used to sense and see the little boy as well. My mom used to feel his energy sitting in the rocking chair. My brother's mechanical toys used to just start making noise. He started to show up less and less in my room, and every time he would, he kind of scared me. He wasn't himself anymore. He was mad, angry, everything. My parents believe it's just because he wanted to be seen and he was lonely, and now that I had a little brother, I wasn't paying as much attention to the little boy. My mom would wake up to my brother crying in the middle of the night and go check on him, and she would sense something standing next to her. Weeks later, we moved out of that house due to a shooting in our backyard. My old nanny, who lived across the street, told us after we moved out, she would always see something in the window of my room. On my scary childhood stories. After my dad remarried, we moved into a blue house, and me and my stepsister shared a room. Right when we moved in, I already knew something was off about that house. It was just kind of creepy. I got weird vibes from it. Nothing really happened within the first couple months of living there until winter hit. Keep in mind, this was like during when I was 14 and 15. Me and my stepsister's room was right below the attic, and at night we used to hear footsteps up there. These weren't footsteps coming from an animal, they were more footsteps coming from heavy boots hitting the ground. I told my dad about it, and so he had an exterminator come over and check it out. When the exterminator came, he found no animals up there and no holes in which animals could get through. But that didn't stop the footsteps every single night. My dad didn't want me and my sister going up there, so one day when he was gone, we went up there by ourselves and found some really creepy things. Stay tuned for part 2. This is part 2 of the attic series. After the exterminator came and found no animals or places where animals could get into, me and my stepsister decided to go up into the attic after my dad had left. When we went up there, it was filthy. The first thing that we noticed were hangers, and they were hanging clothes and belts from the ceiling. The weird thing is the clothing didn't look that gross, and it looked like it hadn't been up there for very long. The energy up there just felt very intense, and we wanted to get out of there right away. The footsteps didn't stop after the exterminator came or after we went up there. We believe after we went up there, we made the spirit angry because weird things started to happen. The lights in the hallway used to turn on and off all the time, even though no one was upstairs because my parents lived downstairs. There'd be footsteps in the hallway, and when we would check, no one would be there. I can't fit everything in 60 seconds, so stay tuned for part 3. This is part 3 of the attic series. One night around 2 o'clock, my brother's door slammed. Take for granted he wasn't home, and then all of the lights in the entire upstairs turned off all at once. A couple seconds later, we heard this old man say hello outside of our door. We started screaming at the top of our lungs, and my dad came upstairs. He turned all the lights back on for us, and once he went back downstairs, the lights turned back off. We also used to sneak out of our windows a lot and leave them open, so when we got back, we could just climb right through, but when we come back, they would be shut. Our beds were pretty much right next to each other. There was just a little walkway in between, and if one of us would wake up in the middle of the night, we could feel a presence standing over us. The footsteps in the attic also never stopped. Comment if you want to hear more scary stories.
In high school, I had a friend who lived in this old, small apartment building. And on the first floor was this old guy named Dave who had apparently lived in the building forever. And no one really knew what Dave's deal was. The only time people saw him is when he walked outside to walk his tiny dog. But other than that, he never left his apartment. He had a nephew who delivered him groceries once a week. My friend just assumed that Dave was too old or had some sort of sickness that prevented him from leaving the house. One day, my friend was coming home from school and Dave's nephew was leaving the apartment building. And my friend is really sweet, so she was like, "Hey, I know Dave sometimes has troubles getting out of the house, so if you ever need me to go over there and bring him something, let me know. I'm always happy to help." And the nephew looked really shocked and terrified. He was like, "No, you should never go over to Dave's ever." And then he got really awkward and he was like, "Okay, gotta go, bye." And then a few weeks later, my friend was coming home from a Halloween party late at night. And when she got inside her apartment building, Dave's door on the first floor was wide open. And it was pitch black inside his apartment. But then she heard something behind her. So my friend hears something behind her, but it's pitch black. She's like, hello? And then she finds the switch to the hallway lights, turns them on, and Dave is standing right there with his small dog. She's like, hey Dave, you kind of scared me. And Dave was like, oh, sorry, I was looking for the light switch myself. But that didn't make any sense because he wasn't standing anywhere close to the switch and he had been living in that apartment building for 30 years. So she starts walking up the stairs and then Dave says, I've been working on a project that I'm really excited to show you. And my friend's like, oh, like an art project? And Dave's like, yeah, kinda. And she's like, okay, well maybe my mom and I can come by another time to see it. And then they say goodnight, but she just feels pretty weird about the whole interaction. A few months later, she's at school and she gets a text from her mom that she has to work late and won't be home to make dinner. That afternoon, my friend walks home, walks up the stairs to her apartment building, goes to unlock the door, but then realizes the door is already unlocked.